It's an emergency edition of the Bleav in Steelers show. Welcome in. My name is Mark Bergin. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded wide receiver George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys in exchange for a third-round pick. There will also be a late-round pick swap between the two teams. Here's my immediate reaction. This means a few different things for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number one, this signals to me that the Steelers are out on Aaron Rodgers. If you're Aaron Rodgers and thinking about potentially coming back for the 2025 season, you'd want to come back with DK Metcalf and George Pickens as your receivers. The Steelers' compensation in exchange for this trade for Pickens, they won't reap the benefits of that until next season. So if I'm Rodgers, I have one less dynamic weapon to throw the football to. I think this means that the Steelers are out on Aaron Rodgers. We'll see. Rodgers could still sign with Pittsburgh, but I think that the Steelers are a better football team with George Pickens on the roster than they would be without him in this deal. Now, Pickens was entering the final year of his rookie deal, and the Steelers had seen enough with him in 3 years. There was the reports of him showing up late to the Christmas Day game, and the fact that he shows up when he wants to, not blocking for Jaylen Warren in a game, I Bleav it was against the Colts down on the goal line. There's been a lot with George Pickens, who's always been described as a mercurial player. But the Steelers get out ahead of this, and they get some draft compensation. So this leads me to Bleav that the Steelers are stockpiling their draft capital and their draft assets for the 2026 draft when it's held in Pittsburgh, and they're loading up to go get their quarterback of the future. I know we're excited about Will Howard, but he was a 6th-round pick for a reason. And I said this on my last show, even if you're psyched for Will Howard and you're all in on the 6'4" frame, the Ohio State quarterback, your best comparison would be Tom Brady, who didn't really play until his second year. He didn't get a start until week 3 of year 2. Or Brock Purdy, who didn't play until December of his rookie year due to injuries. And, oh, by the way, the 49ers had a ton of other weapons around Brock Purdy. Those are your best case scenarios for Will Howard. So this leads me to Bleav that the Steelers are almost throwing away the 2025 season. Mike Tomlin and the organization will never outright say this, but enough's been enough, and you get decent value back for Pickens in getting a 3rd-round pick. This is crazy to me that Chase Claypool got a 2nd-round pick and Pickens gets a 3rd-round pick. Compensation on wide receiver trades, this courtesy of Chris Carter over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. San Antonio Holmes got back a 5th-round pick. Martavis Bryant got back a 3rd-round pick. Antonio Brown got a 3rd and a 5th-round pick. Claypool, again, a 2nd-round pick. And then Deontay Johnson, you had Dante Jackson in return and a pick swap. But Pickens going to the Dallas Cowboys for a 3rd-round pick, and then again a late-round pick swap for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you listen to me on this show, I tried to tell you that when the Steelers went and traded and then signed DK Metcalf to a long-term deal, that the days of George Pickens in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform were numbered. You can go back and watch that podcast or listen to that podcast where I told you as such, because the Steelers are paying a premium for DK Metcalf at the receiver position. The only way they also pay that premium for Pickens would be if he has elite level performance. And so the only way that they could do that realistically would be if Pickens were to take a huge discount, likely much less than what he feels that he's worth, or if the Steelers were to say, hey, we'll pay that 1-year premium on a franchise tag. So the moment they went and got DK Metcalf, that to me signaled, okay, the Steelers aren't quite happy with George Pickens, and they trade him to the Cowboys. Now, some people might feel that they would have liked to see this trade in advance of this year's draft to help this year's team, but the Steelers aren't doing that for all the compensatory picks that they'll get in the 2026 draft back, again, because of players like losing Najee Harris, Dan Moore Jr., Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, James Daniels. The Steelers get a 3rd-round comp for Dan Moore, a 4th-rounder for Justin Fields, a 5th-rounder for Russell Wilson, and a 6th-rounder for James Daniels. The Steelers have a ton of picks in the 2026 draft. But I think that they're going to do that to where even if Mike Tomlin gets them to 500 or better. Tomlin going into his 19th season. You have so many picks if you're Pittsburgh in next year's draft. You can trade up with almost anybody to go get your quarterback of the future. And then you can have a first-round rookie at the quarterback position in next year's draft. And you see how Will Howard develops while Mason Rudolph serves as a bridge quarterback for the time being and is at least serviceable. That's what they're building towards. But again, if you're Aaron Rodgers and you see this trade, why would you want to go to Pittsburgh now? And I don't fault the Steelers for making this deal because Rodgers has had until from the start of March now to May 7th to make up his mind. Are you playing or not? This trade signals to me that the Steelers are out on Aaron Rodgers. That's not official. He could decide to sign with the team or another team. But if you're Aaron Rodgers, at least I knew I had DK and Pickens on the outside. Now that I just had DK, the Steelers' offense is likely going to struggle a lot like it has in previous seasons because of how teams bracketed George Pickens. I'm not saying DK and George are exact replicas at receiver, but how an opposing defense is going to defend this offense. This offense for 2025 was going to be better with DK and Pickens on the field at the same time versus now you just have DK on the outside and then what, Pat Freiermuth? A lot of questions at the receiver position outside of DK Metcalf. Robert Woods, to me, feels like Allen Robinson. It feels like Van Jefferson all over again. Maybe Calvin Austin III can continue to develop. We really haven't seen much of Roman Wilson because he hardly played as a rookie. But teams are going to bracket DK Metcalf. If you're Pittsburgh, what's your counter? Can you get a running game going with Jaylen Warren, with Kenneth Gainwell, with Caleb Johnson in the backfield? And can you rely on a young offensive line where you spent 2 first-round picks back-to-back years? Zach Frazier was a second-round pick. Significant draft capital on your offensive line. It's time to lean on the young guys up front and establish a running game. And I think that's got to be the Steelers' MO offensively, unless there's another deal coming soon here. I know Gabe Davis is now out there in free agency at the receiver position. Potentially you could go get him. The Jaguars just released Gabe Davis today at the receiver position. But to me, these are the repercussions of the George Pickens trade. He's going to Dallas. That's how I foresee everything in what this actually means for the tea leaves. It's not that exciting for the 2025 season, and we haven't even gotten into training camp, let alone the preseason or the regular season. But to me, what the Steelers are doing is doing the things that they need to do to best position themselves next offseason, which the 2026 NFL draft is a lot more quarterback rich than this past year's draft class was. And oh, by the way, you're going to have all the fanfare when the NFL draft is hosted in Pittsburgh. My name is Mark Bergin. This has been my live reaction to the George Pickens trade to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll have more reaction about this. Again, we'll see what this means for Rodgers, but to me, that writing is on the wall in this news today in the trade for George Pickens. So keep it here on Bleav in Steelers. Got a lot of other great guests lined up here on the show here in the coming weeks as we get into the offseason. And then next week, we've got the schedule release as well. So keep it here on Bleav in Steelers. If you enjoyed listening, do me a favor. Go leave a 5-star review, Apple and Spotify. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on the Mark Bergin YouTube page. Again, my name is Mark Bergin. George Pickens headed to Dallas. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.